You're listening to Joy Coaching America with the Joy Coach, Karyn Lynn Grant, spreading upbeat, uplifting, informative messages of hope and happiness from sea to shining sea, from our home in the beautiful Rocky Mountains.
Welcome to Joy Coaching America with Karyn Lynn Grant. And today we have an amazing guest, James Allen Thompson. And I am so grateful for this dear friend who I met a couple of years ago in an extraordinary way over the love of liberty. And so, James, I just want you to say good morning. And will you share a little bit about how you came into that position where we met at the Eagle Forum and what happened and what you were transitioning out of. And then we're going to get into a beautiful, wonderful storyline of James' walk to Washington, D.C. So this is an exciting show that we have prepared for you today, and we're excited to be with you today, James.
All right. Thank you so much, Karyn, for having me over. And it's always a blessing to be connected with you. And I want to begin by sharing just a little bit about my background and how we came about to meet. So this was back in, I believe, 2018. I was making a transition in my life where I was working in tech sales, in business-to-business tech sales. And I just felt like there was something more that I could do with my life, with the talents that I've been given, than just to sell this really cool technology. And so I made the jump into politics because I felt very passionate about what was going on in the country. And so I started to attend different meetings, building my network. And that is where we met. We met at the Eagle Forum. I can't remember exactly what they were talking about that day, but it was such a blessing and honor to connect with you and to be around like-minded people. So that is how we met.
It was an instant thing, when you find like-minded people, and that's what even this whole radio internet is about. Like-minded people who have a passion for liberty and who love the Constitution. And immediately I felt your spirit and knew that even though you were younger than me, but you were wiser than me. And I just was so excited to learn through you, to learn from you, and to follow you because of your great passion for this country, for America, and for liberty, and for the cause of freedom.
And this is an interesting segue into the conversation, but I didn't know this at the time, but I had later that spring, I was getting ready to go out to Washington, D.C. Little did I know that about 2 years later, I would be walking from San Francisco to Washington, D.C. for peace. So that should be a good segue into
what we want to share with you. You've had a love of politics, and we keep running into each other. We keep being at the same place at the same time. And I know there were times when I would call you and you would be here and there, but you were out of the state. You were doing wonderful things, and you were really pursuing your passion for politics. And you've done that, and you're doing that. But then you made this choice, and I heard from you. You were helping me with my work with Joy Coaching America, because you have many gifts that I would like for you to share. Your passions with sharing and letting people know all the good things that are happening in the world and how you do that with your talents. So you're a masterful influencer, and we're going to talk about that too. So tell everybody what you do for people and what you've done for people to share their gifts.
Sure. Let me give you some context first. So since I was a young boy, maybe 8 years old, I always knew that my calling in life would be to share truth, to teach, to write, to speak. And I didn't really know how I would do that because growing up, I was very shy, insecure, introverted. And I remember my uncle, my mom's brother, who started working for Covey at the time, told me if I wanted to do what he was doing, which was speaking all around the world, the best thing for me to do would be to get into door-to-door sales. So I threw myself into door-to-door sales right out of high school. I learned a lot, and then I realized that this was going to be the path I was taking. And so since that time, I've reinvented myself, and I've developed different skills around marketing, storytelling. And so that is a big focus of mine, is helping people to get their message out to their audience. That doesn't necessarily mean virality, because it's not always about that. And we'll share some examples of that about this walk across the country and what that really looked like. But, for me, it's about connection with people. And when I write, I always keep that in mind. And so the gift I guess I've been given is to empower people to make those connections and to share what's in their heart.
And you're going to be doing that. You are writing a book.
Yes.
And I know that I might be jumping ahead a bit to even mention the book, but I think that this is why I wanted to interview you, was I wanted you to share some of the things that you will be doing with your book. The title of your book is so inspired, and I love that. And if you could just share with us anything you want to, or maybe it's a secret. So
sure, I'll leave some breadcrumbs. But the title of the book is called How I Saw It: What I Learned About Developing Peace During My Walk Across America. And this is going to give people an inside look into my daily life walking across the country for the last 6 months, and the perspective that I strive to have when I encounter different challenges. And I'm hoping that they will inspire and empower people when they come across different challenges. I can't think of a harder thing to do during the middle of a pandemic than to walk across the country. And not just that, but show up in DC on January 6th when the Capitol was being raided. So that
was not a planned moment.
It wasn't.
You came into Washington, DC on the day. This
whole experience was guided. And I don't know if you want to get into that right now or we want to wait, but I want to share the big picture of why we did this walk. But, with this book, the idea is to, again, develop these connections and to provide people tools that they can use in their own lives to develop greater inner peace.
Well, you know what? I remember the day you told me you were going to do this. I think it was on a phone call. And then I watched on Facebook as you were posting different experiences. And I've told you that I have a feeling of mother in me for you. And it was like watching my son walk across America and being, those feelings of, oh my gosh, that is a huge undertaking. There's going to be weather. There's going to be people that are not friendly. Yeah. There's going to be people that are angelic ministers. And what encounters is he going to have? And so the day I saw you again planted in my path after you had come home and returned, it was like, okay, I have to hear all about this, and not only hear all about it, but we need to share this with the rest of you, because not all of us are ever going to walk across America, or at least we don't have that on our vision boards, and we don't necessarily want to. And so I'm so excited for you to share with us in the next few minutes what inspired you to want to walk across America to DC.
Absolutely. So a few years ago, I started to have these dreams of me walking back to where I served my mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Washington, D.C. Oh. And so I'd had these dreams of going back to D.C., but they didn't make a lot of sense. I'd been back to D.C. a couple of times since, but I knew something was supposed to happen in my life at the beginning of 2020. It was going to change everything. As everyone knows, the pandemic was really hard on people, and what sparked this walk. Now, keep in mind, I didn't plan on doing this. My friend, one of my best friends, Paul Chavez, he was living in Phoenix, Arizona at the time. He was a teacher, a high school teacher, and I was living in Lehi, and he was planning on moving into the Lehi house with me. But he had went through a breakup. It was like mid-May. And so I flew down to Phoenix. We were going to drive to Laguna Beach and then to San Francisco, where he's from. and then from San Francisco to Lehigh, and then we were in a room together. So we're driving from Laguna Beach to San Francisco. This was on June 2nd. And this, along with all of the shutdowns and the mask mandates and everything, all the chaos, we had experienced an earthquake, I think just a couple of months
that was
prior,
in Utah, right?
In Utah, yeah. Mm-hmm. And so I think all of us are feeling on edge. And I'm just thinking to myself, what can I personally do to stop focusing on myself and try to shine a light on the good that's happening? And so anyway, we were driving from Laguna Beach to San Francisco, and I noticed a lot of people were posting these Black pictures on social media in support of Black Lives Matter and the incident that took place with George Floyd. And mm-hmm. I saw what I was seeing was this division, and I was already seeing it with the mask mandates and the pandemic. But then on top of this, I just thought this is outrageous. Like, we need to come together. We need to take time to listen to each other. And so that's when I said, there's got to be something more that we can do than to complain on social media. And Paul said, what if we do a coast to coast walk across the country?
And that's where it all started. And we will be right back with James Allen Thompson with more on his book that he has been writing, that he will continue to write, that he will release to bless the rest of us, to bless our lives, and to help us to see it through his eyes. This is Karyn Lynn Grant with Joy Coaching America.
From sea to shining sea and beyond, you're listening to Joy Coaching America Worldwide with show host and Joy Coach, Karyn Lynn Grant.
This is Karyn Lynn Grant. We're back with James Allen Thompson and his walk across America with a dear friend of his named Paul. In our last segment, we were just talking, James had just shared with us how they made that decision to make that walk. And now, James, we would love to hear, we left on a cliffhanger. We would love to hear what happened next.
At this point, Paul had suggested that we do this coast to coast walk across America for peace. And this was something that I think Paul had been thinking about because he had just went through this breakup and he was wanting to do or go on a long walk. It's something that he had mentioned earlier that day. And I was thinking like, okay, let's go hiking somewhere. Let's go hike the Appalachian Trail. But walking across America was not something I was.
It wasn't just taking a walk.
And so I immediately said yes without even thinking about it. And then I realized, what did I just commit myself to?
Oh, wow.
So I had a lot of anxiety over the next few days that we spent in San Francisco because I thought, next time I'm back here, I'm about to go on this 6-month journey. And so we decided if we're going to do this, we're going to do this within 2 weeks. And I went back and I sold my car. I pretty much just left everything behind. And we went out and we plugged the map, Google Maps, with San Francisco to Washington, D.C. in the walking route. And so that is how we essentially got started. That's kind of the nutshell of what happened.
That is amazing. And so what did you take? What did you take? Did you take a lot of money? What did you do?
Well, this walk was initially self-funded. So, I sold my car and, used some savings. And so I purchased a backpacking backpack, and brought a sleeping bag with me, a couple of changes of clothes, and just like the very basics, some food, some camel packs to fill up with water. But we really couldn't bring a lot with us. Now, before we left on this walk, we had this friend, Katrina, who was just ecstatic about what we were doing. And she asked us, how are you guys planning on getting across the desert? And we just kind of looked at each other. We're like, well, we don't really know. We'll just figure it out as we go. Mm-hmm. She said, well, I think it'd be better if I came out and drove Paul's Subaru as your support driver. And so Paul thought about it. And he's like, yeah, we'll do that. We'll split gas. And so the plan was for her to meet up with us once we got to Yosemite. So we spent the first 2 weeks completely on foot. We, a lot of times we would just sleep on the side of the road or behind churches or at parks. But once we met up with Katrina, it made it a little bit easier for us to find places to sleep every night.
What paths did you follow? Did you follow highways? You were on the highways?
So initially going through the Bay Area was just, walking through neighborhoods and just on the side of the road. The further east we got, we would hike trails going through the mountains. Then as we got out of the mountains and into the desert, we would walk on the side of the highway. And that was a good, probably, I don't know, close to 500, 600 miles of that for the first, 2 months.
That's amazing, yeah. James. What do you do while you're walking? Did you walk and talk? Did you listen to audios? What do you do as you're walking?
Well, so initially when Paul and I walked together, we would spend a lot of time talking to each other. I would spend a lot of time taking pictures and videos and putting together content for the people that followed us. Mm-hmm. I would listen to a lot of podcasts. I'd have a playlist where I'd listen to music that inspired me, that helped me to keep going when I didn't. Mm-hmm. And then there were sometimes, especially times when we didn't have cell service, where I just, walked silently and prayed, talked to God. I would talk to myself. I would just leave space for creativity.
So, James, as you embarked on this journey, you didn't have a whole lot of time to mentally to prepare for this and to know what it's going to be like as you're going through mountain passes and all of that and the weather. Mm-hmm. So tell us what it was like to be hiking through mountains and the weather conditions. What happened along the way?
It was nerve-wracking. So the first mountain range that we went through was Mount Diablo in the Bay Area. And, I'm from the city. So, I've been camping before. I was a Boy Scout, but never have I experienced anything like what I'm about to describe, which is we had interactions with wild animals, coyotes, mountain lions, bobcats, moose, bear, rattlesnakes. And so we'd have these experiences, but I always felt protected. And never was I to the point where I thought, my life was going to be truly in danger. There were a few times where I crossed my mind, but, as far as the weather goes, of the 205 days that we were on this trip, we only had 5 days of, you could say, bad weather, whether it was rain or snow. And I had put that out there to Paul. I told Paul, I said, we're going to have good weather most of the time here. And I was pretty confident that would be the case on the west side of the country. But as we got further east, it's more likely that it's going to rain and snow. But we happened to make it across the country with pretty much good weather. There were some really cold days that we experienced, but we managed to get through it. We just bundled up and
So what did you do for your first Thanksgiving on your walk across America?
That is a great question. So let's see if I can summarize this story. So about a year ago, I went to this concert. It was a One Republic concert down in Vegas. And at the end of the concert, I met this gentleman who had this interaction during the middle of the concert with the lead singer of the band, Ryan Tedder. And he said, hey, did you by chance get a recording of me having this interaction? And at this point, I was really tired. I just wanted to go back to my hotel, but something told me connect with this guy. So I sent him this video and we stayed in contact. Now, this guy is from Kuwait, but he lives in Illinois. And we stayed in contact. And when Paul and I decided to do this walk, he reached out and said, hey, I'd love to donate to your campaign. So he was a monthly contributor. And then he said, when you get to Illinois, I'd love to host you. So anyway, we get to Illinois, we show up to his place, and he had a bed made for us with chocolates on the pillow
and wonderful
slippers. And he bought me new shoes, and he had snacks for us and made us lunch every day, made us sandwiches. He bought us dinner every night. And then this is what was really amazing. He told us he was going to take us to Disney World for like 4 or 5 days. We were going to fly to Disney World. We were going to take a break from the walk and then come back and resume. But the problem was Paul had lost his license up in the mountains, in the middle of the fires that we were in. And that's a different story.
Wow.
But so we couldn't do that. So instead we decided to take 2 days off, and we went to Chicago. He put us up in a hotel. He made 50 sack lunches for the homeless, and we went out and delivered them. And that was a beautiful experience, connecting. I mean, I've done that before where, I've gone out with some friends and we've, delivered food to the homeless. But it's a different experience when you are homeless, because we've been basically homeless for the last 3 months. And so the amount of empathy just grew because I could finally start to get a grasp around what they could be feeling, like the anxiety of where am I going to get my next meal?
Wow.
Where am I going to sleep that's going to be safe and warm? All these different things that a lot of times we take for granted, that I know I've taken for granted, which is sleeping in a bed. And that was a wonderful experience. Jobber, he treated us to this really nice dinner, this restaurant right off the river. And this guy was truly a saint.
Can I ask how old he was?
He's like 35.
What a sweetheart.
Yeah.
What
so
an amazing,
Christ-like.
An angel along the way, right?
Yeah. And I have other stories to go along with that. But that was our experience on Thanksgiving. It was beautiful.
So that was Thanksgiving Day.
Yeah.
You spent your Thanksgiving in Illinois.
In Chicago.
In Chicago. Yeah. In a restaurant on the river?
Yeah. Yeah.
How amazing. What a saint. Mm-hmm. What an amazing man. That will be a lifelong friendship, won't it?
Absolutely.
That just gives me tingles to hear that there are people that he would not only bless you, take care of you, and then provide 50 lunches. There are good people in this world. And we will be right back with more from James's experience in walking across America and the saints and angels he met along the way. This is Karyn Lynn Grant with Joy Coaching America.
Welcome to the Loving Liberty Radio Network.
Welcome back to Joy Coaching America, raising the world's vibration to love, joy, and peace, one happy listener at a time.
Welcome back to Joy Coaching America with Karyn Lynn Grant, interviewing James Allen Thompson on his journey to Washington, D.C. He calls it a walk across America. And I'll tell you, James, I'm still tingling from the last segment and the story about your first Thanksgiving out there in Illinois, Chicago, with a wonderful 35-year-old saint who we want to pay tribute to. And if you are listening, you wonderful soul, we're so grateful for you taking care of James along the way and the 50 people that James then got to share lunches with because of you. You know, you said an important thing, James. You talked about the empathy that you gained for the homeless as you walked across America, not knowing where you were going to lay your head. I'm sure you also gained a lot of empathy for Jesus when he says that he had no place to lay his head. And what an experience. I think that this is a multifaceted experience that is going to continue to have a ripple effect in your life as you go through your life and you reflect back on, wow, what an amazing experience. So we got to hear about Thanksgiving. I can hardly wait to hear about Christmas, but I know there was some in between November and December. So share with us the journey to Christmas.
Yeah. So first I want to share that this walk, it wasn't about us. It wasn't about us actually walking every single mile across the country. God had a bigger plan, bigger purpose for us, that, with the lessons that were learned. And, our intention initially was to walk every single mile across the country without a support vehicle. We were so driven by this cause of inspiring people to get outside and walk more, and also to look for the good in their communities. That's really what this walk was about. For me, at least, it was about perspective, bringing peace to our lives. And so, things happened that were out of our control. And that's a really good lesson to be learned in our life, is that a lot of things don't go according to plan. And that's okay, because God still has a beautiful purpose for that. And so, we had this intention that Katrina was going to finish this walk with us, that Paul and I would be able to walk together the entire time. Well, Katrina started to get sick. I won't go into that, but we decided it'd be best for her to go home and to see a doctor. And so she did not end up coming back out with us. So we had to change the way that we did this walk once we were about halfway through Utah, where we wanted to keep the support vehicle just because, based off of our experience, we knew we still had a good amount of miles to go through the desert and the mountains, and it would have been very difficult to do this walk without the support vehicle to restock on food and supplies, or even if just something happened, right? Mm-hmm. This is not a set path to take. And so it was a very dangerous walk to be on. And so we decided, you know what? That's okay, because we will continue doing this walk. This is about encouraging people to get outside and walk. It's not about us. It's not about, look how cool Paul and James are walking every single mile across the country. So, we both took a humble pill and we decided what we would do is I would walk the first 3 miles. Paul would drive up, drop the car off at 3 miles. He'd get out and start walking. And then I walk up to the car, pick up the car, drop the car off wherever he is, or at 3 miles. And we would just do this. So that way we're both walking at the same time, but we're covering more ground. And I believe that this was for a lot of different reasons I won't get into here, but there was certainly a purpose for us to having that vehicle, both protection and also people that we needed to interact with that we wouldn't have been able to had we not had that vehicle. So I bring that up because I need to explain that so people would understand what happened when we got closer to DC. So my goal personally was to finish this walk. I wanted to get to DC because I had friends out there that I wanted to visit, and I just wanted to spend Christmas in DC relaxing, and just, this was going to be our target, but it wasn't our final destination. Our final destination was Virginia Beach because Paul wanted to do a true coast to coast. So we wanted to jump into the ocean. So things happened, and we were still about 2 weeks out from reaching DC. This was I think mid-December. At this point we were I want to say we're in Pennsylvania at this point. And so we decided to mark our location, and then we drove to DC to spend Christmas with a family. And it was cool. We actually got to do a White House tour. I think it was a couple of days prior to Christmas. And that was a really neat experience to be able to go through the White House, thanks to one of our friends. And so we got to spend a couple of days relaxing, and it was much needed because we were going hard for the last
that you were exhausted.
Yeah, it was. And, the thing is that it had snowed, and so we were just ready to take a break. But again, this all worked out the way it should have, because after DC, we picked up where we left off in Pennsylvania, and then we had made it to DC on January 6th.
So that is a huge experience in and of itself in coming in. Now, you said that you went to the White House before Christmas.
Yeah.
And where were you on Christmas? So
we were in Manassas, Virginia. That is where I had served my mission for my church. And we stayed with the family, the Webbs. And
was this a family you had known since your mission?
Yeah.
So this is a huge impetus in this connectivity of continuing these friendships throughout your life and continuing the correspondence. And you're such a wonderful connector. And that's just amazing that you were able to stay with them. And I bet they were so excited to hear of your journeys.
Yeah, they were following us from the very beginning, and they were a huge support. It was really nice. The thing is had we not had the support vehicle, we probably would have been somewhere. I don't even know where. Maybe we would have been in Ohio, maybe be in Indiana at that time. Honestly, we probably would still be walking at this point had we not done it the way that we did, because Paul had some back pain that he was dealing with, and so he wasn't able to walk as far long as I was able to. And just with all the different challenges that came up, it really did work out the way it should have.
Well, that's wonderful. We're so grateful to that family too in Virginia.
Yeah.
And so now you have had Christmas, you've had Christmas morning. What happened next? We want to hear about, I want to hear the in-between and your day when you walked into DC on January 6th, which was not a planned moment.
No.
It was, again, a serendipitous moment that was by divine design.
It absolutely was. And keep in mind, I had this sense of urgency to finish this walk. And looking back now, it wasn't necessarily to finish the walk as much as it was getting to DC when we did. That's the way I look at it. And so remember when we talked about you being on the phone with me, that day that I called you and told you that I was doing that walk, that was just a couple of days after we had decided, but we happened to be in the middle of the Black Lives Matter protest in the Bay Area. So fast forward to after Christmas, I'm feeling this sense of urgency to get there and to not waste any time. And I even had this impression before we got to DC that something significant was going to happen there in the Capitol. I didn't know what it was, but I felt some anxiety. And then as I was walking, I think I was in Maryland at this point, the Panhandle of Maryland. I remember seeing the sign that said, "Be still and know that I am God." And I posted that on social media. And then as we got closer, we ended up getting to, we walked with some friends from Arlington National Cemetery to the Lincoln Memorial. And that was on January 5th. Okay. So the plan was we wanted to do a walk from the Lincoln Memorial to, I think it was the Capitol building the next day. And then from the Capitol building, we would make our way down to Virginia Beach. So the night before, and keep in mind, I didn't know that there was going to be this Trump rally or this protest. So we decided to go. And the night before on January 5th, I had posted, I said, please pray for this country. Something is going to change. And so we showed up there right at the Capitol building on January 6th. And, a lot of things happened that day that I was not expecting to. And I don't know if we want to stop there, but
we're going to talk about that. You talk about the feeling that you had, that sense of urgency, the sense of discernment, all of these spiritual gifts that accompanied you along the way on this incredible journey that you took on your walk across America. And I love that. I know that you have mentioned to me, not on the show yet, but the ministering of angels. And we want to hear all of these things. And I know it's going to be so great in your book, James, as you write about your walk across America. We'll be right back. This is Karyn Lynn Grant with James Allen Thompson on Joy Coaching America.
Welcome back to Joy Coaching America, raising the world's vibration to love, joy, and peace, one happy listener at a time.
We're back with James Allen Thompson sharing his walk across America. And James, in our last segment, you had just entered into DC on January 6th. It was not planned by you, but by some divine intervention that you showed up. And what I was thinking about between our, as the news was playing, what I was thinking about is here you've had solitude, you've had quiet, you've had time for reflection, maybe more than you actually wanted, but you had a lot of solitude. Now you show up in Washington, D.C. on one of its busiest days in history. Tell us what that was like on January 6th, walking into D.C.
Yeah. So when Paul and I decided to show up in DC that morning, we felt we needed to be there as observers to share this perspective. Obviously, this was a divine appointment for us to be there at this time, especially with how ironic it was that we started this walk because of the riots and the protests going on across the country. And so we thought it was interesting that this all worked out the way it should have. So we show up in the morning. At like 7:00 in the morning, I had to go find a restroom, and I was looking all across the Washington Mall, and I couldn't find anything. And so I walked past the Capitol building, and then I found one closer to the Supreme Court building. But the entire time I was thinking to myself, why isn't there more security surrounding the Capitol building? Because especially with what was supposed to happen that day between the verification of the certifications for the votes and the tens of thousands of people that just flooded the street. I have never seen anything like that before. I mean, there must have been well over, 50, 60, I don't even know, 1,000 people at the Capitol. It was just incredible. But these were very good people that love America and are concerned about their liberties. And I'm not going to take a side here, but my experience was these are just good people. There were families there, there were people of all different backgrounds.
Did they have little children there?
They have little children there, and it was a great event. But still, I'm thinking to myself, something seems off. And I had this impression that, this group, Antifa, that has been instigators behind a lot of the riots across the country, I had a feeling that they were going to be there, but maybe not. Maybe they weren't going to be there. And I guess what I'm saying is I felt like they were going to be in disguise. I know that sounds kind of bizarre, but like, I didn't feel like with that amount of people there supporting Trump, I didn't feel that they would try to outwardly cause trouble. I felt like maybe there was a different plan.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense. And so we were there for the rally. The rally was great. There was, singing and prayer, and just, there were a lot of people that were just wanting to hear the president and have their voices heard. Right. And so keep in mind, when we were there, I tried to go live on Facebook and I couldn't. It seemed like all of our phones couldn't connect. So I couldn't reach Paul because we had been separated. And there were some other friends there at the Capitol that I wanted to meet up with. But at the end of the speech that Trump gave.
So you were by yourself, separated from Paul?
For the first part. And then we ended up connecting. We found each other. So at the end of the speech, Trump had encouraged everyone to march down Pennsylvania Avenue to the Capitol, right? And we had a dinner appointment with a member from my mission who I did not want to be late for this dinner appointment. And so Paul had said, let's go down to the Capitol. And this was around, I want to say it was like 4:00 at this point. And we had parked our support vehicle in College Park, Maryland. So we needed to take the metro to College Park and then drive, and just knowing DC traffic. I just wanted to give us enough time, but something told me, don't walk down to the Capitol building, leave. And so, I told that to Paul. I said, we need to get out of here. Something's about to happen. And so we left. And as we got on the metro and got to College Park, I started getting messages. Hey, are you okay? Did you see what happened? And I looked at the news and the Capitol was being raided. And I thought that's interesting. But I knew instantly it's not what the media was reporting. And I knew instantly that there was something else going on. And I'm glad and I'm really grateful that we weren't part of that, because I didn't want to be associated with the violence, especially after we just did this walk for peace, right? But I knew something was off. And we had some friends there that had heard some people saying things like, now is the time to make these people look bad. And so I knew that there were some people there that had bad intentions, that were not there to peacefully protest. And so I feel like that was part of the reason why we showed up to DC, is to provide this perspective of not taking a side, but taking a step back. And this is something I learned over and over and over again about not making assumptions. And And so, I came from a place of, hey, let's not categorize this entire group of people. It doesn't matter if you support Trump or not. Let's not categorize this group of people and judge them, because we don't know. We don't know if there were truly Trump supporters inside the Capitol. I'm of the opinion, my unsolicited opinion, that there were people there that wanted to cause contention. And there are some things, that happened there at the Capitol that, why aren't we addressing? Like, why were these officers letting people inside the Capitol? That doesn't seem right. And so what kind of message is this sending to our enemies, that all it takes is, a few hundred people to storm and raid a federal building? Now, keep in mind, like, we had to go through several checkpoints going through the White House. Okay. How is it that it was so easy to get inside the Capitol building? That just doesn't make any sense. So there's a lot of things that are really off about that, not to become a conspiracy theorist, but I think the whole point of this is we got to start asking questions. We got to start thinking for ourselves, and we have to remove judgment, because I believe that is what the adversary wants us to do. Is he wants to create division, and we need to come together, honestly.
Well, and also just to believe in hearsay.
Yeah.
And that we're not, I hope that your experience and your book that you're writing will have questions for people to ask themselves. It's so important that we don't just believe falsely, that we do introspection, that we use the gift of discernment as you were using it all along this journey, that we follow our intuition, that if we don't feel good about something, that we don't just follow just because everybody else is sheep herding down the same path. Yeah. And for you to step out and do this journey with Paul was a super huge act of courage. I'm sitting here listening and I'm thinking, there is no way I would ever want to do anything like this. I don't have that kind of adventure in my soul, but I'm so grateful to know you and that you did and that you followed this, because I like I said, there's going to be layered effects of aha moments that are going to come from this experience. I just see this whole experience as layers and layers and layers that are going to be like pop-ups. When you need inspiration, you're going to be able to fall back on something that happened and along the way. How many of us could take a journey with a best friend for 6 months in less than favorable conditions with a pair of shoes, and here somebody bought you a pair of shoes along the way? But how was it with Paul? I mean, not to ask any personal questions like, did you guys ever fight? But was it always easy? Did you ever have disagreements? And there you were together, and you had to work together to make this plan work.
Yeah, great question. So I've known Paul since almost a decade, actually. And we had been roommates before. We went to school together. We went to church together. We were really great friends, and we've done a lot of road trips. But this, I don't think anyone can really expect how to handle these different challenges that we had together, because we have different ways of seeing things. It's not about being right or wrong, but
just different vantage points and perspectives.
We both have very strong personalities in a lot of ways. And so, you're making every single decision together. And to be quite honest, it was ironic that there were times where we weren't at peace with each other, and that's okay. We have to give ourselves space to make mistakes, because that's how we learn and grow. And so I felt, honestly, a good portion of the walk, I felt this imposter syndrome. Like, here, I'm trying to promote peace and unity and love and acceptance, and I can't even accept Paul. In a lot of cases, there are things that he would do that bothered me, and I had to work through those. And the same for him. I know for certain that there were things I did that bothered him. But this goes back to what we were talking about of introspection, taking time to, and this is where walking is really beneficial, is taking time to really ask yourself those questions. When what happened at the Capitol, it's so easy to be outraged. And there's a lot of things that are out of our control. We have to ask ourselves, what am I really in control of? I don't even like that word, to be honest. I don't even like the word control. I ask myself, what can I personally do to improve my behavior, to improve my attitude.
For the good of the whole.
For the good, right, exactly, because there's this ripple effect that takes place when you become reactive. It just is, look at what happened with George Floyd. People became reactive without actually taking a step back and saying, hey, we don't know all the facts. We don't know if this officer was really being racist. We don't. And I think it'd be important for us to take a step back in a lot of these situations and say, before I come to a conclusion, I'm going to come from a place of love and trying to understand. And so that did help us a lot of times. We would get into these arguments, or like very heated arguments, but then we would somehow be able to work through them. And we're still best friends to this day. Like it's such a blessing that we've maintained that friendship. And
you'll be closer than ever. You can't go through some, it's like
no one else can relate to me. And then
floating on a piece of driftwood after you just sunk the Titanic, and there you were, and you just had to get through it. And that relationship is going to be deep, and it's going to be lasting. And I love the whole perspective of not judging each other. If there was that perspective of peace in this world, and coming with the intention to understand each other and to understand one another's intentions, not every action that we do, it doesn't always end up the way we intended, right? So I think it's a beautiful journey. We have so much more to share. We can do more of these. We are so grateful to James for sharing your walk across America. And we will look forward to part 2 with you as we discuss more about how we can interact together as citizens of this great nation to bring peace, love, and joy. This is Karyn Grant with Joy Coaching America.